First, though, we are going to be looking at some pretty significant changes we've seen unfold this morning in Australia's media landscape. Today, Fairfax has announced that 1,900 jobs will be going over the next 3 years. On top of that, printing facilities are shutting, paywalls are going up, and the hard copy of the paper will no longer arrive in the broadsheet format. Earlier, I spoke with the Shadow Communications Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, for his thoughts on the changes.
Well, I think as Michael Smith said today, it's the golden age of newspapers is certainly over, but whether the golden age of journalism is over is another question. There'll always be a lot of journalism. The challenging thing is to find the revenue base, the business model that will actually pay for it.
And that is the problem, of course, generating
Absolutely.
revenue.
Well, this is the irony, Ashleigh. You see, this is the bitter irony of it all. The journalists at Fairfax, just like the journalists here at Sky, have never been read or watched by more people than they are today. Their reach is much greater than it has ever been because of the digital platforms. The problem is that the revenues, advertising revenues, have moved online, and much of that has gone to platforms like Google, which are essentially just search, and a whole range of others. So that now they're, as they say in the States, they're losing print dollars, print advertising dollars, and getting in return digital dimes.
So is this move to a paywall inevitable, do you think?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Look, I think what Greg Highwood is trying to do is very commendable. He's trying to make that transition. You can make the case that Fairfax should have done more sooner, but you can't live your life backwards, whether as a company or as a person, and so they've got to get on with it. But it is a very, very challenging transition, and the question is, as he tries to do this corporate surgery, will the patient survive?
Do you think we're far off here in Australia for some newspapers to go purely online, that the print editions might just die out altogether?
I think that will happen. I think there is certainly a scenario you could see for the Metropolitans, the Fairfax Metropolitans, and you could certainly see this for the Australian newspaper, where they would be digital only Monday through Friday and then perhaps have a print edition on Saturday. Now, that's the New York Times itself has been looking very closely at that, and of course there are massive savings there, but the problem is, as long as you've still got a solid base of advertising in your print edition, much of which you don't think will transition to the digital platform, then you're reluctant to abandon the print platform. But at some point, it will have to happen. And, this is where the destructive creation or the creative destruction of the internet is affecting all businesses. Similar challenges face free-to-air television and indeed subscription television like Foxtel.
You've described it as a threat to democracy, the impact on journalism through these changes. Do you think there is a place for the government to intervene in any way to promote healthy journalism?
Well, let me just explain what I mean by that. The work that you do as a journalist and the work that other journalists do is just as important in our democracy as the work that I do as an elected legislator. So our democracy depends on a strong, vibrant, healthy, independent media. Now, the big foundations of that independent media have been the big newspapers historically. They've been the gatherers of most of the news. They've set the agenda. As they decline because of the dwindling revenue base, the question is, what replaces them? Are we going to be left with a sea of blogs and tweets? I don't know that'll be enough. Will we be able to move to sufficiently authoritative digital online newspapers that will then take their place, so that 10 years from now we'll look back and say, what were we getting so worried about? All that happened was, we went from paper to digital, and everything, functionality improved, efficiency improved, impact improved. So let's hope we can make that transition. But that's my point about democracy. We mustn't short sell the importance of news gathering, independent news gathering with credibility and integrity that people believe is objective.
So if there is some threat on that level and we don't make that transfer as effectively as we might
should
like,
the government
should
subsidise
there be
newspapers?
some sort of
No,
government intervention?
No, I think we've got a model in Australia, which we're not unique in that respect, of course many other countries have too. We've got a model where the government has public broadcasters, ABC and SBS. I don't think we should be subsidising newspapers. I mean, there is a little bit of a subtle subsidy in the sense that if you look at the newspapers, you'll see that one of the areas of advertising that seems to be sticking to print more than other categories is government advertising. So maybe there's a bit of subtle support there.
And there's a whole other debate that we could have on that topic. But on another matter, in the past you have failed to get Tony Abbott to allow a conscience vote on same-sex marriage. Is that something you're still hoping Mr Abbott may change his mind on?
Well, Tony made the decision that we were not going to have a conscience vote on the same-sex marriage issue, and that has the support of the party room. So that I don't anticipate that decision being revisited. Obviously. It's a view that people had a range of views on, but I don't see it as being revisited. So the coalition front benches, at least, unless they want to resign from the front bench, will vote against the same-sex marriage legislation. Backbenchers, of course, in the Liberal Party can always cross the floor without risk of being expelled from the party, but I don't think it's likely to be a lot happening there. Now, if I can just say something constructive here. The reality is we do recognise same-sex couples now in the law as it stands. What we don't do is recognise them in a formal way and describe them with the term marriage. What we should do in this Parliament, and I think we've got the numbers, there are the numbers in the Parliament to do what we should do, is legislate for civil unions. And there's a whole range of reasons, which we could go into if you're interested, in why we should do that. We shouldn't let that opportunity pass. I mean, the marriage issue is a very hot-button issue for a lot of people. I accept that most Australians are quite comfortable with same-sex couples having their relationships recognised as a marriage and termed a marriage, but there is a group of people, whether it's just under half or less than that, but it's certainly not a majority anymore, who are very, very keenly opposed to it. And I think we would be better off moving on civil unions now, where I think there is broad support, and then see what develops over time. Now, that's a pragmatic approach.
A lot of people do assume that you support same-sex marriage and that if you had it your way, you would vote in favour of it. Is that a misguided assumption?
No, look, I would be quite untroubled by the state recognising same-sex couples and giving that the term of marriage. I have to say to you that I find the argument that the institution of marriage is under attack from homosexuals wanting to live together as quite ridiculous. The institution of marriage in our society is under attack, or, under threat, if you like, by parties to marriages, heterosexuals, lacking the commitment to stick with their marriages. It's the breakdown of marriage. If you wanted to, if church leaders are out there saying, stick together, don't commit adultery, or forgive your partner for being adulterous, or, be more understanding, stay together, for God's sake, men and women of Australia, don't get divorced. If they were saying that, I'd say, yes, that is making a powerful statement in favour of marriage. I strongly believe that our society would be better off if more people were married and fewer were divorced, right? But having said that, the proposition that my marriage to Lucy is threatened or undermined because down the road there are two gay men living together or two gay women living together and wanting to have their relationship recognised. That's unreal, Ashley. If we're serious about...
To clarify, if this was in the Parliament and you had a vote and you were allowed a conscience vote, you would support same-sex marriage?
Well, it would depend on the legislation, on the bill.
But as a general premise, you support same-sex marriage?
As a general premise, I've looked at this very carefully over the years, and I have to say my views have changed on it. But I find the argument against same-sex marriage less and less convincing in this sense.
Does that transfer, though, into you supporting it in the Parliament?
You just let me finish what I'm saying. The critical thing is this. What we should be in favour of is commitment. Now, at the moment, there is nobody here in this Parliament that doesn't believe that it's better for people to support each other and to be committed to each other. Now, if you take the view that homosexuality is immoral and that gay people should just be celibate and should not engage in sex, they should just suppress their feelings, well then of course you'd be against any form of recognition. But that's a moral view. It's not something Parliament has taken. Parliament has said over a long period of time we should not discriminate against people with a homosexual orientation, and we do currently recognise same-sex couples in a whole range of legislation.
So can I just get a straight answer from you, Malcolm Turnbull? Would you support same-sex legislation if it got into the Parliament and you were allowed a conscience vote on this issue?
If there was a conscience vote on this issue, subject to the legislation being satisfactory and going through it, I would be more likely to support it than not. But you're asking me a general question which then has to be applied to specific legislation. But the fact is that politics is a team sport. We have decided on our side not to have a conscience vote on this issue. You know, there is a variety of views on that, as you know, but so we're not going to have a conscience vote on this issue. So I won't be crossing the floor on this issue.
Malcolm Turnbull there speaking with me a little earlier. We will look more at this issue coming up on the program.